And welcome everybody to FanStream Sports powered by DSP Media. This is the Fighting Irish Daily Blitz, and I'm your host, Rob Thitoff, also known as RPT. You can find me on X at PThitoff. This is episode 118 of the Fighting Irish Daily Blitz, and this will be the Stanford recap. But first things first, head over to our website at fanstreamsports.com for all additional podcast information. If you have an Apple device or an Android device, please feel free to download the FanStream Sports app and then head over to our Facebook page. Like that page, additional content out there as well. Please feel free to share that with your friends and family. Notre Dame comes away with a dominating performance last night, a 56-23 win over Stanford. You'd think I'd be ecstatic, but actually I'm pretty pissed off right now. I know the movies Fast and the Furious. To me, those are some of the worst movies in cinema history, but I'm pretty furious right now the way they played, especially the first half. 3 turnovers. They were only up 21-16 at halftime. Sam Hartman had an interception, a fumble. Jadarian Price fumbled a kickoff return. That led to a Stanford touchdown. Despite that, though, Notre Dame does dominate in the second half, as they should. When I watched this game, Notre Dame is just a way better football team than Stanford. It was like varsity against JV. Pretty much the summary is we have a lot better players than Stanford, and that's why we won the game, just because we're more talented. But it's very concerning. This is another occurrence where we were just not ready. The first half of the game against an inferior opponent, that's a telling tale with Coach Freeman and staff. I'm going to be pretty harsh when I sum up this podcast in a little bit here. But first talking point here, Fubo TV. That's where, that was one of the main outlets you could go to watch this game on the Pac-12 network. It started out kind of rocky for me. I did that free subscription for 7 days, and it said you could share it with 10 different users. I shared it with my nephew and my parents. So there's 2 additional users, but throughout the game, it kept saying you're sharing it with too many people, and that was not the case. I talked to some friends who were not sharing it with anybody, and they were getting that same pop-up, but then other people were having no issues at all. But I kept hearing about 50-50 where it was good, and then others where it was just a fiasco. So I was thinking about changing over to Fubo TV. I've heard some good things about it, but I'm not going to be changing over to that anytime soon. I'll stick with YouTube TV. And actually, 3 minutes after the game, I canceled my free subscription, so I would not be charged. So real quick, Fubo TV to watch this game, not the best. Hopefully, we never have an occurrence like this again where we screw around and become an 8-3 team, and we're on some obscure network in the future, to be determined. So for this game, as I said, I'm furious about this game. Yes, we won 56-23, dominating performance. Audric Estime had a great game, record-setting game. He has 18 rushing touchdowns for the year. That's a school record. He's not up for the Doak Walker, a semifinalist for that award. That's kind of puzzling right there for the top running back in the nation. But he will be I don't think he'll go lower than the second, possibly third round in the NFL draft. I think he's a second or third rounder. I think he'll be a solid pro. But just real quick on the stats here, Notre Dame had 521 yards to 359 to Stanford. It is kind of telling, though, that even though our defense played good enough, I've said that before, this defense is good enough to be a playoff team this year, if not further. But let's go over the stats really quick here. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of this, but Notre Dame had 521 yards to 359 for Stanford. I thought that was way too many for Stanford, but a lot of that was on 2 plays that Stanford had. I've been saying this all year. Notre Dame's defense is good enough to compete for a playoff spot, if not a national title. The problem's been all year the offense, but still too many yards that they gave up the defense. But for the most part, especially in the second half, they held their own. They gave up a garbage touchdown at the end when our third string was in there. The big key right there, turnover. We had 4 turnovers, 3 in the first half. Sam Hartman had a fumble, an interception. Jadarian Price, a fumble on a kickoff. And then Steve Angeli during garbage time, he had an interception as well. That's probably his worst play of the season. He's been pretty solid when he has come in the game. But in any event, I still say that's just shake it off, Steve, because I really think he should get a shot to be the starter next year. And if Sam Hartman does not play in the bowl game this year, I'm hoping Steve Angeli gets the start. So I'm not going to put too much into the Steve Angeli interception there. And then really quick here, Sam Hartman was only 8 of 14 for 140 yards. He did have two TDs, but a fumble and an interception. With the more I think about this too, the way our offensive line was dominating Stanford, because they were an inferior opponent yesterday, you could pretty much just run the ball pretty much every single down, or at least 90 to 95% of the time. and you would have won this game. And it shows here, Audric Estime, 25 carries, 238 yards, 4 touchdowns. I said earlier, he set a school record for rushing touchdowns in a season, 18 touchdowns for the year, 4 touchdowns for this game. He's now like Al Bundy from Married with Children, who scored 4 touchdowns for Polk High back in the day. Another pop culture reference there. So for this game, why am I so furious? I said it earlier. This is the 12th game of the year. Yes, it's not going to be a perfect game. However, this team should not be coming out, creating multiple turnovers, giving up big plays here and there. You should be locked in by the 12th game. And Coach Freeman, I've given you a mulligan for these first 2 years, but no more. The bell curve is off right now. You're heading into that 3rd year this year, and it's got to be cleaned up pretty good. I said that with Brian Kelly in 2011. That team was very talented, but a lot of miscues during that year. They lost a heartbreaker in the Champs. I think the Champs Bowl. It's now the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which the bowl we may be going to. We'll find out next Sunday. But I had told, I didn't tell him. I don't know him, but I had said after that game, in 2012, they're going to have to really tighten the ship pretty much and eliminate turnovers. And more or less, how can I say this? Just be a tighter ship is what I'm trying to say. And they came out, they went 12-0 that year. They did get killed by Alabama in the national title game, but his 3rd year, and that's the key for all great Notre Dame coaches, that 3rd year, the really good ones win a national title or have a really good year like Brian Kelly had in 2012. And I still think he was a solid coach for Notre Dame, but I'm tired of these mulligans. I'm giving Coach Freeman, he's got to really tighten up the reins, because here's the thing. It wasn't like Brian Kelly inherited an awful program at Notre Dame when he got the job in 2009 for the 2010 season. I know Coach Kelly left the quarterback room and the offense kind of in a fiasco, but it still wasn't like what Coach Kelly had inherited back in 2009. And I know Coach Freeman's young, but I'm tired of saying that. Kalen DeBoer from Washington, he's now in his 2nd year at Washington. He inherited a mess 2 years ago. They're undefeated right now. They had a really close game in the Apple Cup yesterday against Washington State, but they're on the verge of a playoff spot and a chance for a national title this year. Oregon, who lost to Washington in a nail-biter earlier this year, Dan Lanning, 37 years old, the same age as Marcus Freeman, 2nd year as a head coach. They're on the verge of a playoff spot as well. If they win the Pac-12 championship game next Friday night, they will be in the playoffs. But he has very limited experience too, same age as Marcus Freeman, and he's going to he's on the verge of a playoff spot. So I can't give him the excuse now for age and experience. 2 other coaches, Kalen DeBoer from Washington and Dan Lanning from Oregon, are getting the job done, and they came into more of a mess than what Marcus Freeman. To me, Marcus Freeman didn't inherit a mess. Those 2 kind of did, especially Washington. And I'm just tired of giving them excuses. So we'll see what happens there. And now just my final talking point here. Yesterday was Ohio State, Michigan. Michigan won. It was a great game. But what Michigan did at the end of the game is what Notre Dame could not do against Ohio State back in September. What was the score? It was about 27-24. Michigan got the ball with 8 minutes left, and they just ran it down Ohio State's throat pretty much. They didn't end up taking the entire amount of the clock time off the, how can I say it? They didn't run it down to 0. However, they got it down. They got a field goal, and Ohio State only had about a minute to go. Had Notre Dame, once Audric Estime had that 11-yard gain back in September, they just kept feeding the ball to Audric Estime. The game's over because I think there was only about 2 minutes left there. Ohio State's defensive line, their whole defense was gassed. And Michigan yesterday ran it down their throats with about 8 minutes left. They didn't get down to 0-0-0, but they did get it with about a minute left. They ended up getting that field goal. So Ohio State had to score to win the game yesterday, score a touchdown. And Ohio State was driving, but they ended up pressuring Kyle McCord. He throws a bad ball. It gets picked off. Another thing that Notre Dame didn't do in September, DJ Brown had an interception against Kyle McCord. Would have sealed the game. He dropped it. The Michigan guy did not. But the thing is, the maize and blue of Michigan showed the blue and gold, I guess you can say green at times, Notre Dame, how it is. Say what you want about Michigan, the whole sign stealing scandal or whatever, but they got the job done. Notre Dame can learn from the maize and blue on how it is to seal a game for a big-time opponent in Ohio State. And my last point, too, Sherrone Moore, I think is his name. He's the acting coach for Michigan. He's the offensive coordinator. Another 37-year-old young coach like Marcus Freeman. Talk about inheriting a mess. 3 weeks ago, he's told, you're going to have to coach because Jim Harbaugh is suspended for the next 3 games. And he's done a stellar job. He had a big win at Penn State. And then the granddaddy big game to win the OSU game. And he hasn't flinched. And I would love to have him as an offensive coordinator, because that was the thing, too, I forgot to mention earlier. With these last 2 games against Wake Forest, Stanford, really bad teams, I can't tell how incompetent Coach Parker still is with the offense, because we put up so many points. Yeah, some were offense, some were special teams, some created by the defense by creating turnovers, but you can't really tell how good if offensive coordinator Parker is improving, because it's 2 really bad opponents. But Sherrone Moore, the 37-year-old young offensive coordinator who was the active coach for Michigan these last 3 games, has represented big time. And I can't say enough, Marcus Freeman, I can't keep you on this bell curve anymore, because I'm seeing younger coaches or coaches just as young as you being a lot more successful, and some inheriting more of a mess than what you did at Notre Dame 2 years ago. So I can't say enough. The maize and blue showed the blue and gold, and I guess green too, how you should get it done, or to seal a game against a big-time opponent. What else here? But here's the thing, just to kind of sum up too, we finished 9-3 the regular season. I don't know if this is a good thing, but with Ohio State scoring 24 points yesterday against Michigan, it's now the 2nd year in a row for the regular season. And depending on what Ohio State does in their bowl game, or somehow, if they do go to the playoffs, if they score more than 17 points in their bowl game, which they probably will, it'll be the 2nd year in a row that the Notre Dame defense has held the Ohio State offense to their least amount of points for anyone on their schedule. Last year, they held them to 21. That was the least amount of points they scored in 2022. And in 2023, they limited them to 17 points back in September of this year, 2023. So for 2 years in a row, at least for the regular season so far, Notre Dame's defense has held OSU in check, one of the best offenses in the nation. And I got to think Ohio State will score more than 17 points in their bowl game. It's a great job, but we didn't get the win. That's the big thing right there. But some sort of solace in there that, hey, we've held OSU's offense pretty much in check the last 2 years. We just haven't won the game. But going into 2023, I can't say enough. Marcus Freeman has got to hit on that 3rd year. If you cannot get to, because next year to get in the playoffs, you got to get in the top 12. If you can't get in the top 12, I'm sorry, I think it's time to go. I know that's only a 3-year coaching stint that you've had. But with the transfer portal now, you inherited a pretty decent team. We're supposedly getting all these great recruits, top 5 to 7 recruiting classes in the nation. I mean, even with this year with the 6-year quarterback, we couldn't get it done. But 9-3 is not good enough. If we win the bowl and we're 10-3, that's still not good enough for me right now either. So 9-3, 10-3, holding OSU to their least amount of points the last 2 years, it's not good enough. We got to get in the playoffs, and we got to make some noise in the playoffs. It's been since 1988 since we won a national title. What else here? I don't think, just some real quick tidbits here. It's looking right now, we're probably going to play either in the Pop-Tarts Bowl that I've been playing, but now it's starting to look like the ReliaQuest Bowl. Yeah, ReliaQuest Bowl. Yeah, I did say that right. They, that's the old Hall of Fame Bowl, and then for years it was the Outback Bowl. It's typically the SEC team against a Big Ten team, but somehow Notre Dame must have an affiliation with the ReliaQuest Bowl, and it's looking like LSU, coached by Brian Kelly. But here's the thing, if it is LSU, Jaden Daniels, who's up for the Heisman Trophy, it's going to come down to me, Jaden Daniels of LSU or Bo Nix of Oregon. Michael Penix, I think he'll be third, but he's a candidate as well. But I say it's either Bo Nix or Jaden Daniels. I highly doubt Jaden Daniels will play. I highly doubt Aldrick Estime for Notre Dame will play. If I'm Aldrick Estime's parents, I'm saying, no, you do not play in this game, risk an injury. People are like, well, you have no love for the game. For a sub-tier bowl that really means nothing in the grand scheme of things, at least in the college football landscape. Okay, put another, if we do win that game, it's another bowl win for Notre Dame. Okay, so whatever. But that's just a dumb way to get hurt, to ruin your draft stock. People say, well, you can get hurt in many ways, but to get hurt in that type of way, I just think is worse. Aldrick, I would sit that game. I would think even maybe Sam Hartman. I just kind of want him to sit anyway, because I just want to look to the future with Steve Angeli, and maybe even get Kenny Minchey in the game. Kenny Minchey, I think you still had to play 4 games to lose your red shirt for the year, and I think he's only been in 1 or 2. So he could still play in that game and not lose his red shirt. But it's looking right now that ReliaQuest Bowl, and that's on January the 1st, which kind of makes things a little bit better too. I always think if you play a game before January 1st, that kind of puts a damper on things too, because back in the day, the big bowls were on January 1st. I know you still have those sub-tier games, but it just means a little bit more, at least in my the way I think. What else here? But I can't say it. 9-3 is not good enough. 10-3 is not good enough. Last night, I was pretty pissed off. I was furious the way they started that game. That should not happen in the 12th game of the season. And Coach Freeman, it's time to put your biggie boy pants on right now. You're going into your 3rd year. Yeah, you're still a young coach, but so is Dan Lanning. So is Caleb. Kalen DeBoer. It's a different type of name. I had to write that down there. Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, Sharon Moore, who's done a tremendous job at Michigan. I don't care about that sign cheating scandal. I heard some of that's just BS. Some I heard it's pretty serious, but in any event, to do what he's done in the last 3 weeks with all those distractions and then just run it down the throats of a great OSU defense yesterday, what we should have done against OSU back in September, I can't say enough. The blue, gold, and green can learn from the maize and blue right now. I can't say that enough. What else here? I think that's about it. So thank you so much for joining me next week when the bowl game is announced next Sunday. So that'll be, I think, December 2nd or around there, or December 2nd or December 3rd. I'm looking at my calendar here. I think that is December 3rd. They'll announce the college football playoffs, and then later in the day around 2-3 o'clock, we'll get my prediction still is either the ReliaQuest Bowl, which is in Tampa, Florida, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play at Raymond James Stadium, or the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which is played in Orlando. And I believe that's like where Central Florida plays their games. But it's more or less the old Camping World Bowl, the old Blockbuster Bowl. We played there before. And then we'll go from there. And then I'll also have probably a basketball preview either this week or next week. I want to see some more games, because now it's starting to get into Cupcake City a little bit too much. I want to get a big enough sample to give my analysis for both the men and the women. And then I'll have Greg Schaefer on probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the bowl. Because that's the thing too. Once the bowl is released next week, they're going to have a good 4.5 weeks, if not 5 weeks, depending on when that bowl game's played. Not off. They'll still be practicing, but before they play their next game. But Greg and I will probably review the season, then give our predictions for the bowl game and what needs to happen in year 3 with Coach Freeman. I like you, Marcus Freeman. Seemed like a great guy, but I can't give you this bell curve anymore. I can't give you this mulligan. When I see all these other young coaches being successful, coming into even worse situations that you did, and when we keep having these slow starts against inferior opponents, that's concerning to me, and I hope it's concerning to you and your staff, because we got to get this figured out. 9-3 or 10-3 is not good enough. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 118 of the Fighting Irish Daily Blitz. And as always, go Irish.